needs no introduction. She is Associate Professor of History in our department. She has been a dynamic addition to the history department and this university since she joined us a few years ago.
So, let me start by saying, in addition to thank you to the commentators, thank you to Marcus for organizing this, and many thanks to two people who work behind the scenes, Grace Tomcha and Luis Bravo, here was, for putting this all together. And more broadly, thank you to the Pitt History Department, which has been my home now for a decade, believe it or not, even though I'm still introduced as our new colleague, Lara Putnam. Those of you who are at the university that know that means perfect sense. Things change slowly in Pittsburgh. So this has been a fantastic intellectual home for me for the last decade, because it's been a place where people are trying to think about history in new ways and trying to think outside of the national boxes or regional boxes that have traditionally helped contain the work that we do as historians, which has been both useful because you can't write the history of everything everywhere forever, because that story would never end and never begin and never end. But so these national boxes have been useful, but they long ago became a crutch that sort of kept us from seeing all kinds of important things that turn out to have been visible to historical actors at the time if we could only listen to them. And so working amidst colleagues who are so engaged in the process of thinking about transnational, Atlantic, world history and otherwise has been incredibly useful. I'm going to frame some of my next thank yous I'm just going to frame as like advice, free advice, and you know free advice is worth what you pay for it, but still free advice to come here. If you're trying to write something, the single most important resource in the entire universe is readers, right? So the one thing that I think I did well over the last 3 or 4 years was force my work on anyone who was willing to read it and beg them to read it and then actually listen to what they were saying. So to the extent that any of the praise that you heard was merited, it's actually merited more or less by many people in this room and then some beyond its borders who, in the form of book discussion groups, whether it was the Caribbean reading group that Shalini Puri here and I have been co-convening, and I forced the whole group to read through my manuscript of a grad seminar at CMU 2 years ago, led by John Soluri, and I forced them to force them, but I was delighted to have a chance to have them read what was really a work in progress and full of flaws and just hear what they had to say. Similarly, multiple different individuals and others. And I have to give special thanks to a few people who are in this room who read the manuscript in their entirety, even though they didn't have to. One was Nigel Boland, who actually read it for the press, so maybe he had to. But I gave enormously helpful feedback, and then very kindly moved to Pittsburgh so that he could be here and join our intellectual community. So his feedback was fantastically useful. So was that of Rob Ruck, who read through the manuscript in the early phase and said, "Now, you do kind of want to make this a book that people want to read, don't you?" You've got an important story that you're trying to tell, but I really encourage you. He didn't say take half the words out, but you know it was very in a loving way. That's what he meant, and that was incredibly useful. And his own work is, of course, a model of writing history that people really want to read. And Reed Andrews did a spectacularly detailed reading of the whole manuscript with the smartest of comments on every page. And then a huge shout out to my brother, Jonathan Putnam, who there's no one you can rely on to read something at the last minute late and except for your family, right? You have to, who is it who it's not going to be too embarrassing to say, okay, I'll get you that chapter, sometime this week or maybe next month, but I need it back in 24 hours. Only your family loves, home is the place where when you get there, they have to take you in. Like the reader equivalent of that was turning to my brother, bless him, non-academic, a civilian, and he was so knowing that I was trying to write something that he would be willing to read was a fantastic guide for me, and his feedback was super helpful. So the second one thing that I think has been captured about the project that I was really attempting to write a history that paid attention to the importance of everyday choices made by everyday people, and that was both aware of how constrained those are, but also how much they matter, and that was respectful find a way of telling a story that captured that captured both that creativity, that potential, the way that history really does change because people make choices. If a lot of people shift the way that they're doing things, that's what adds up to demographic change or political change. So I wanted to capture that interplay, to write that bottom-up history, right? To capture that interplay between the attempt, the ways that people attempt to make their lives, and the kinds of constraints that they're facing. And in part, this was reflecting. I sometimes say that I wrote the first book, my dissertation, which is about gender politics and reproductive labor. And I wrote it while I was having 3 children and in grad school. So in some ways, you can sort of read that book as it's like a hidden ethnography, hidden autobiography, right? It's like it claims to be talking about reproductive labor in Costa Rica's banana zone, but it's really saying like, my kids are driving me crazy. So in some ways, there's that autobiographical backstory, right? Which all of us sort of, which maybe is always there for every formally academic production. In some ways, one of the key components of the driving the story that I was attempting to tell, or driving the inquiry that I was attempting to carry out here, was it was at least shaped by the fact that having been given birth to those 3 children, I then spent the next, Lord knows, 15 years driving them around the world, from family in Costa Rica to family in the United States, crossing borders with a stack of documents higher than the children were tall, because there's a Costa Rican passport, there's a permit, there's the U.S. passport, trying to manage a transnational family that included a mother-in-law in Costa Rica, being aware of just how, the incredible help that family provides, but also how, state power was not like an abstract thing that I needed to historicize. It was like there was a man, and I had to prove I had to hand over my passports and get the children across the border. So in some ways, the intellectual project that this book is taking on is trying to understand how the world came to be divided up by, border guards who claim that they have a right, who need to see some kind of document in order for me and my children to go see their grandmother. Like, where did that come from? And the amazing thing to me about the 1920s and 30s is that it was the moment when that system became naturalized and was imposed. And before that period, that really wasn't true. For Asian migrants, restrictions had been put in place again in the late 19th century. But so if you look at that period of history, you get to see the moment in which people go from being able to go where they're willing. If you're willing to work and sweat in some new country, and someone's willing to employ you, you can do that. And you can rely on a family to be part of what supports you through that. And after this new mobility control regime is put in place, that's no longer the case. And one comment that Carol actually made earlier in a forum earlier today was that coming from outside of the United States to the United States, you're so struck by how ignorant people in the United States are. They're just saying, it's this incredibly powerful, wealthy country. Surely you expect people to be very aware of things around the world. But of course that's not true. It's the opposite. When you're a citizen of a powerful, wealthy country, you have the privilege of ignorance. You don't need to know. But that is particularly true about the international migratory system, right? Because most people who are born U.S. citizens never realize how hard it is to cross borders in this world. Because they have one of those few passports that would take them almost, and if they have to, God forbid, go to the Indian consulate to get a visa to go to India, they complain about it for 6 months. Even though they got the darn visa, it's not like it was hard, but they had to go through. Whereas people growing up in places like Costa Rica or Trinidad or Jamaica know so much more than people in the U.S. about the U.S. migratory system. And people born everywhere else in the Americas know in detail exactly how U.S. immigration law works, because they need to navigate it. And it's standing in the way of them doing the work they want to do or being with families that they want to be with. Whereas most people born as U.S. citizens never have to experience that. So part of the project that I'm trying to, part of what I was hoping to do with this book is to write a story that told about the past, that made that strange, that made parts of modern life strange, made it strange that we live in a world in which borders exist as they do, and also thought about some of the consequences at the level of politics and popular culture, and multiple different levels, the consequences of putting those borders in place, how it was that it happened, and what people do in return. And my hope is that, maybe if we can start telling different stories about who we are and where we came from, maybe we can change the terms of some debates out in the broader public, maybe. Because of course there's that system of documentation delimitation and borders establishes, one set of rules about who counts as being from where and what privileges go along with that. But there's also the power of stories, and the power of culture and things like ideology that sometimes runs counter to that, right? And so belonging, even though there's a system of borders and passports and so on that rule belonging and privilege, it isn't the perfect fit, and stories can carry more power than that. Now, I can give you an example of how that's true. Of course, the number of people who apparently believe to this day that Barack Obama is not a U.S. citizen.
Right.
He's got, right? So, he's got the Hawaiian birth certificate, but somehow, so this is sort of a negative example. It sort of shows us that actually this borders and birthplaces and documents can't always outweigh things that people need to believe. But I kind of want to turn that on its head and wonder, well, okay, if there's that power of what we need to believe and power of how comforting certain stories can be, that we can cling to those stories even in the face of documentary evidence to the contrary. Well, is there a way that we can sort of do like a jujitsu move as historians or academics or storytellers or novelists and use that power of the stories to help to sort of overcome the limitations on our imagination that are put in place by an international system that divides out privilege so very unequally. So that's sort of what the bigger picture of what I was trying to do here, and hopefully, and to the extent that I've succeeded at all in making that somewhat coherent in this book, or really making anything coherent, it's because so many people were willing to read it along the way and tell me where I had really gone wrong.